let's continue with NewsNation Chief Washington anchor Leland Vittert, host of On Balance. You know, Leland, we just heard from the two gentlemen in there with that quick, very brief commentary. We have these conflicting reports of the bombing at a hospital, but President Biden himself admitting it's likely not Israel fire. We do know one thing. Israel's record proves they don't target civilians.
Exactly. And I think that's incumbent upon us as journalists to provide both context and understanding. Imagine if you're in Kansas and you hear thundering footsteps or hoofsteps as a journalist, and Hamas tells you it's zebras and Israel tells you it's horses. As a journalist, you have a responsibility to say, well, I've lived in Kansas for a long time and there's no zebras here. It defies any kind of logic that Israel would have done this. And as somebody who's covered a lot of war, and you look at the video of even the scene, a few things, as you pointed out, there's no crater. There's no evidence of a large bomb, which is what Israel drops. The idea that 500 people, as the Palestinians claim, died in that explosion is laughable. You have the video evidence of the Palestinian Islamic Jihad's rockets going off. All of these things defy credibility, and I think it makes it even worse at this point that the Palestinians lied about it and blamed Israel for it. And I'm old enough to remember when journalists were extraordinarily proud to call out politicians who lied, and to have moral clarity about issues like Ukraine and issues of moral clarity on BLM and on Donald Trump. And I'm wondering why those same requirements of moral clarity and of calling out people who lie and calling out people, in this case, who bomb their own hospital, doesn't apply when Israel's on the other side.
You know, mentioning the double standard, we've seen a lot of comparisons to Ukraine. Some saying it's very obvious that Israel is being held to a different kind of standard when it comes to these calls for restraint against terrorists who targeted mothers and children and grandparents. Is the administration, are they sidestepping this?
I think that's a good question. I think that this issue with this issue of the explosion at the hospital and is perhaps a turning point, right? Because as President Biden left, there was clearly a feeling, perhaps, that this could be the moment that President Biden could call for restraint. He could call for the Israelis to stop, and he hasn't done that. And I think that's a significant moment. I would say that the more correct analogy is not Ukraine, but is ISIS. And the war in Ukraine is between two countries. The war with Hamas in Israel is between a terrorist group that wants to wipe one country off the face of the earth. There's a difference there. Evil's evil, but there's differences. And there was never a call for restraint when it came to ISIS. There was never both sides of ISIS's claims of things. Because ISIS said that X number of people died in an airstrike, we didn't even report it because it was a terrorist group saying things that we knew coming from people who lied,
who could not be trusted.
That's, I think, a fundamental difference that we probably should keep in mind.
Yeah, I wanted to go deeper on that question, but for the sake of time, I'm going to move to this: the timing of the president's trip. Could some see that as an attempt to intentionally cool Netanyahu's retaliation in terms of this strike to destroy Hamas that he's vowed?
Yeah, I think very well can be seen as that. And remember that we had the idea of a ground invasion coming last weekend. It has not happened. There's probably some military reasons for that. There's also potentially some diplomatic reasons for that. The idea that a ground invasion would happen during President Biden's visit is unlikely. You add on to that that we've seen calls for quote unquote restraint from Israel and fears about Palestinian casualties. Now appears as though Hamas is probably more culpable in Palestinian casualties than anybody else. So take that for what it is. I would add one thing to the president's trip. As Americans, we should all want the president to do well. America is safer when the president is respected around the world. The world's safer when America is respected around the world. The currency in the Middle East is fear and respect. Your enemies must fear you, and your allies and friends must trust you. I don't really see a lot of either of that right now. In that Jordan and Egypt, traditionally very strong U.S. allies, especially Jordan, doesn't even, the king there doesn't even want to meet with President Biden. Those aren't friends who trust you.
And thank you for watching. Go to newsnationnow.com to find NewsNation on your television provider. And don't forget to click the red subscribe button below to get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.